Hey everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden and welcome to week 10. Yes, so week 10, we're almost done with my Master Gardener's Training recap. So I am taking my local Master Gardener's Training program. It has been absolutely fantastic and I wanted to document every single week for you all just in case you are considering taking your local Master Gardener's Training program. Spoiler alert, it's amazing. I highly recommend it and think that you should do it if you could swing it. Yes, it is a lot of time. It is 4 hours once a week for me. And then we also have a test. It's an open book test, so it's not that big of a deal. But then we also have volunteer hours and stuff like that throughout the year. And then you have to do volunteer hours every single year as long as you want to maintain your Master Gardener certification. So I don't think that's that big of a deal because I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to contribute to the community, and the amount of information I have learned thus far, I mean, it is worth double the amount of hours that they are asking. So it's really great. So week 10 is plant pathology week, or what the heck is going on with my plant? So a little bit about the presenter. The presenter for this week was another Master Gardener. She actually came from Napa. We do live close to Napa County, and she is a Master Gardener trainer there. She has minored in plant pathology, and that's why she teaches this plant pathology course, and she knows her stuff. She's been teaching it for, I think she said 20 years or around there. Don't quote me on that, but she was really fantastic. I do have to say this was a hard week for me and for my classmates. After we were walking out of the classroom, we were talking about kind of how hard it was and how overwhelming plant pathology is. So basically it's the diseases your plants can have, identifying the diseases. So if you see like some spots on a leaf, or a leaf is suddenly dying or yellowing, or something just all of a sudden is wrong with your plant, what this class was focusing on was identifying what the problem was. Next week, we are going to be talking all about insects. So this really focused on the diseases that cause issues in the plants. And so, I'm sure that there's a whole nother 4-hour topic that I will go over and I will learn for the insects for next week. But this is all about pathogens and diseases. All right, so let's get right into it. First off, I think the most important thing that I understood about the class is that diseases are caused by two different factors. They're caused by biotic factors, which are living things like bacteria, fungi, viruses, nematodes, and parasitic plants. I'm not going to really go over nematodes and parasitic plants at this time. Nematodes are like little worms. They're all over the place. There's tons and tons and tons of nematodes everywhere. There's some good ones and there's some bad ones. I will link a YouTube video that the presenter actually recommended. I will link it in the description down below, and you guys can watch that if you're interested in learning more about nematodes, which can cause quite a bit of damage in your garden. I know this because my neighbor across the street has nematodes, the bad kind, and so he got the good kind of nematodes to eat the bad kind of nematodes. But I'm not going to go over that much today, as well as parasitic plants, which are like mistletoe, right? Mistletoe on a tree the roots get into the tree and it can really cause damage. So those, along with the bacteria, fungi, and viruses, are the biotic diseases. But then there are also abiotic diseases, which are things like sun or cold, nutrient deficiencies, water problems, chemical problems, and even hail. Hail could be an abiotic disease that can cause damages on plants. So those are things that we have to think of. We have to think, okay, I can see the symptoms of my plant. I can see that the plant is suffering and there's something wrong with it. Is this a biotic cause or is this an abiotic cause? And probably, there's a couple ways that you can go through and you can determine what most likely is the culprit. Usually with abiotic causes, non-living causes, the damage is localized. So if it's sunburn, if sun is causing it, it's usually on the sunny side of the plant, and then the shady side of the plant is unaffected. If it's hail, hail damage, and you have to remember, hail damage, like a hailstorm, can happen, and then it can be weeks, if not months, before you notice the damage, because hail can actually damage the little, buds of the the plant that aren't even open yet. And so then all of a sudden you open and you think, oh, I have a bug that's eating my plant. Well, actually it was that hailstorm that happened in January, you know, and you're not putting two and two. So, two and two together. Did I say that right? Anyway, so abiotic causes are usually localized on the plant. And the message that I got from this class was the more you look at your plants, the more you familiarize yourself with problems that are going on, the better you're going to be at identifying it. They made it clear to us as master gardeners in training that we're not going to know every single disease that a plant has. We're not going to be able to look at a plant and be like, oh, that's that, you know, that's this disease, or you have this going on. The presenter even had us bring samples from our own gardens that had like leaves that had spots on them. And we brought them in and we discussed every single leaf that each trainee brought in. And the solution wasn't to identify exactly what was going on with that leaf. The solution was, or the experiment was just to really start looking at the problem, looking at the symptoms the plants are trying to tell us, and trying to be detectives to try and figure out, you know, what's going on. And, you know, what I brought in a couple of my honeysuckle leaves that have a couple spots on it, and we didn't even come up with a solution, right? So it's what I'm trying to say is that, you know, even as master gardeners, even as an experienced plant pathologist master gardener, she's not going to be able to identify all the diseases, but she does know how to look at the problem. She does know how to describe the problem, and then she does know where to go to research the problem to find some answers. So if you've been watching these Master Gardener training recaps for a while now, you've probably noticed that I keep recommending books to you guys. And that's because the Master Gardeners program keeps recommending books to us, but they're all really, really good books. So this book right here, this is called Pests to Landscape Trees and Shrubs, and there's different versions of this as well. They actually had us purchase this. Like, we didn't have a choice. We had to purchase this along with, our handbook. So these were the two books that they absolutely wanted us to purchase. I'll see if I can find this on Amazon and link it. It's a super helpful book. Unfortunately, it's just landscape trees and shrubs. And then they have other books for like fruit trees and, ornamentals. I don't know. I don't know all the exact versions they have, but a classmate and I were looking it up, and we were identifying that there was a bunch of different versions of this kind of book. And this is a fantastic book to look up what disease or pathogen might be affecting your plant. There is also, for free, there is the UCIPM website. And I have told you guys about this website many, many times, and I probably will continue to tell you guys about this website. It basically does the same thing that this book does. What it does is, you know, you identify what plant you're dealing with, you identify what the symptoms are, like stippling on leaves, right? Or wilting leaves, or crispy edges on your leaves, or something like that that's going on. And then you can look it up on that website, and then it can give you the most likely culprit that it might be. Same thing with this book. You kind of go through. In the back, it has a bunch of really great tables where it has plants and then the most likely culprits and what you would see with those most likely culprits. So super, super, super helpful. I will try and link this down below, but I will definitely link that UCIPM website down below for sure. All right, so speaking of symptoms of the pathogen or the disease that's going on, there's one thing that we have to understand, and that is there are symptoms and there are signs, and those are two different things. So a symptom, I have to read this so I say the right words. A symptom is how the plant responds to the disease. So like wilting or yellowing or death or anything like that. A sign is actual evidence of the causal agent. So if you have like a fungus, when you see the sooty fungus spores, that's a sign that you have the fungus. But if that fungus is causing wilting of the leaves, the wilting is a symptom. And to be able to describe all the symptoms that are happening on the plant is something that's really important, because that's how we look up what disease or what pathogen is causing damage on your plant. In our syllabus, in our Master Gardener syllabus, they gave us this, they called it a tree. This tree right here. I cannot find this online, you guys. I'm having so much trouble finding this online. It's by Oki, Dim Sum, and Kabashima, but basically it's a tree of all the types of symptoms that you could have on your plant. So basically, you go through and you say, okay, types of symptoms, it's on a leaf. So on a leaf, you could have blisters, leaf curl, dwarfing, firing, hydrosis, mines, necrotic spots, rolling, scab, scorch, skeletonizing, stippling, right? So then you can go through and you're able to look at your leaf, look at the issue that you're having, and be able to properly describe the symptoms you're seeing, so that when you take your book out or you go to the website, you're able to properly describe it. I took a picture of this and put it on my Instagram, so you guys can look at it there. How else can I get it to you guys? I'll take a picture of this and post it in the community tab as well, so that you guys can look at this as descriptors for symptoms that you have for your plants. But I felt like this was so interesting. It was important enough for them to put it in our syllabus. So I felt like that's really good. And I feel like I'm going to rip this out and actually post this in my office, because I just feel like it will be so helpful when I have something going on. I will be able to say, instead of like, I have yellowing leaves, right? I'll be able to describe it just a little bit more. So I think that's super important in being able to identify exactly what's going on in your plant. All right, so you have your plant, there's an issue going on, you know that something's wrong, you are able to describe it appropriately, and you've determined it is not abiotic, it is actually biotic. And so that means something living is attacking the plant and causing these symptoms that the plant is having, right? So, I already said that we're not going to talk about nematodes and we're not going to talk about parasitic plants just today, just in my recap, because I feel like that will take forever. But what I do want to talk about is fungi or funguses, bacteria, and viruses. And those are the three, I would say, most common issues that aren't insects that are going to be attacking your plant. And I do have to say, a lot of these things are actually transferred by insects. So the insect could actually be the problem that is bringing the pathogen or the disease to your plant. So you kind of just, it's most important just to understand exactly what's going on and being able to identify the correct problem. The presenter gave a really good example of like roses, like all of a sudden, say you see a bug on roses. I can't remember what bug she said right now, but I'll just say the easiest one. Say you see ladybugs on roses, right? And we all know ladybugs are good, but you see ladybugs on roses, you don't really know what ladybugs are, right? And you think, and then all of a sudden your roses are starting to look kind of wilted and kind of yellow, the leaves, and it just doesn't look good. And you don't want to say, oh, it's the ladybug's problem. It's totally the ladybug's problem because you saw the ladybug on the roses. Because if you look closer, the ladybugs are actually eating the aphids, which is the actual problem, right? And maybe the aphids are on there because the rose has black spot or something like that. So the rose isn't healthy enough to fight off an aphid. So it's not always exactly what you see right up front. You have to kind of dig a little bit deeper and understand what's going on. I hope that made any sense at all. All right, so I just wanted to talk about a couple pathogens or diseases that we will most likely see, at least here in California, probably in warmer climates. I'm sure all of you in cooler climates and wetter climates are going to have your own set of diseases that you'll see way more often than we do. But this was just pretty interesting, and I think it just explains what the presenter was trying to get across when trying to identify the pathogen that you're dealing with. So when you're looking at a biotic cause of disease, if you're looking at fungi or funguses, fungi are usually dry with a defined border. So if you see a damaged spot on your leaf and it's nice and dry and you can see the border and it's not spreading outwards that much past that border, then it's most likely a fungus. If you see a slimy, smelly, or wet border, slimy, smelly, or wet spot without a defined border, that's most likely a bacteria because of how the bacteria attacks the plant cells. The bacteria is so small, so it'll insert itself into the plant cell and then release these chemicals that actually dissolve the plant cells. So there's no defined border because those borders are getting dissolved as the bacteria spreads. So usually like wet, gross, yucky spots or signs are usually going to be bacteria. So you kind of want to think about that. If you see something wrong with your leaf and it's dry, you kind of want to think about a fungus. If you see something with your leaf wrong with your leaf and it's wet, you probably want to start thinking about bacteria, right? And then the third one is viruses, and viruses are so small that we really can't see anything. We can't see anything wet. We can't see anything dry because a virus gets so deep into the DNA of the cells, we don't see anything except for the symptoms of the plant, which would be like colored or distorted tissue. For instance, rose mosaic disease is just discoloring of the leaves. So if you don't see actually anything wrong, if you can't see spots or anything like that, then you might want to think, oh, is it a virus, right? So those are three just basic ways that can kind of lead you on your path to determining what is actually going on with your plant. Okay, so let's talk about a couple common diseases that we often see and just, talk a little bit about them and how it can help you decide what you're going to do. Again, I just want to say, spoiler alert, the class wasn't really super focused on treatment of these diseases. It was more focused on understanding what's going on and then you going to a book or going to a website to understand what the treatment is. And if you go to that UC IPM website, it's an IPM, Integrated Pest Management website. So they're going to go over the integrated pest management flow of dealing with an issue like this. So it's not always, if you're dealing with a fungus, it's not always spraying fungicide as step one. It might be step 5 if nothing else works, but there are a couple other things that you can try first before you start spraying that toxic chemical. So speaking of funguses, one common one that we deal with here, and I think a lot of people deal with, is powdery mildew. And powdery mildew often gets confused with downy mildew, but a really good way to know the difference is that powdery mildew likes warmer temperatures and downy mildew likes cooler temperatures. So powdery mildew, you're obviously going to see that white, dry, powdery spot on your leaf. Again, dry, so you're automatically going to think fungus. Powdery mildew is a fungus that attacks the leaves. And so if it's early on in the season or really late in the season when it's already cooled off, you might want to think downy mildew. But if it's, like summer or spring and all the temperatures are warming up, then you might want to think powdery mildew. And these can be spread by wind, rain, insects, and relocation of infected tissue. And that is why it's super important to clean up your mess in the garden. If you have a plant that's infected with powdery mildew and then you cut off the leaves or you prune the bad leaves and you just drop them, or they somehow rub against another plant, you're going to spread that fungus from one place to another. Same thing with an insect. If an insect walks over a leaf that has the powdery mildew on it and then it flies to another plant, that's how it's going to spread as well. So something to think about, powdery mildew is a very common one that we will often see. And I think it's a good one for us all to know what is going on. One interesting thing they did say about powdery mildew is once you see it, there's not much you can do, which I found very frustrating. But basically powdery mildew, once you start seeing the sign, not the symptom, the sign of the powdery mildew, it's kind of past the point where you can do anything about it because it does spread so quickly. So then you kind of have to think, okay, well, what can I do to limit the spread, right? Maybe taking out that plant or pruning off the bad parts of that plant. And then knowing, oh, hey, I always get powdery mildew on this plant every single year, maybe then preemptively spraying just to make sure that you don't get it once the temperatures warm up on that time of year. Maybe like grapevines or something like that. That's a pretty common thing for us in California, is powdery mildew on grapevines. All right, then another disease that's pretty common is fire blight. And fire blight is something that affects apples and pear trees. And this is actually this is a bacteria, right? Fire blight is a bacteria, and there are actually sores that open up, and there's this sweet, sticky goo that comes out of these sores of trees that are infected with fire blight, and the bees are attracted to that. So the bees walk over that sticky goo from this bacteria and then go to another tree, another flower on another tree, and infect that tree. And it spreads so quickly. Fire blight is a bacteria that spreads so quickly that it kills the plant and and it kills it so fast that the plant doesn't have any time to drop its leaves. So everything just dies and it ends up looking like the plant caught on fire. And it is well known for having the stem kind of curve over like this. I'll see if I can find a picture. But it's very common, and it's a very hard thing to limit because it is spread so easily by insects. What you want to do if you have a tree with fire blight is you actually want to prune 6 to 12 inches past the point where you can see where there's damage. Because it spreads so quickly, you have to make sure that you get all of that bacteria out of the tissues that are already spreading even a little bit further. So sometimes this is a problem for people if they've had fire blight spread so far that you're going to end up cutting off most of the tree. So the tree might just be done and you actually can't prune it out. So unfortunately, this is a very quick disease, and identification is huge, because if you can identify it as soon as you get it in, a couple of branches or a couple of stems, if you can get it out of there, you can treat the problem. If you leave it and you don't pay attention to it, it can basically take the whole tree very, very quickly. Okay, then finally, a good example of a virus is rose mosaic disease. And like I said with viruses, you're not going to see anything wrong other than the symptoms of the plant. So if you have rose mosaic disease, it's going to look like these yellow spots on your rose leaves, and you're going to say, what is going on? I don't understand. Nothing else is wrong except for they have a little bit different of a color, and that's because the virus is in the cells of the plant and you can't actually see the virus. You can't see any symptoms of the virus. And unfortunately, we have no treatment for viruses. So if you see something is wrong with your plant and you have determined that it is a virus, there's no virus spray or anything that we can do for these plants. The only thing you can do is cut it out and get it out of there. And you want to cut it out and get it out of there as soon as possible, because you don't want it to spread to anything else. So viruses are scary, like tobacco mosaic virus, or rose mosaic virus, or cucumber mosaic virus. There's a whole bunch of them, and they're just ones that you want to be able to identify pretty quickly. All right, so like I said, today's class, or I should say Friday's class, it was very kind of abstract, I would say, because it wasn't like we went through every single type of disease and we did look at samples of a lot of diseases, but there's so many of them. There's no way we could go through each one, and giving you guys an example of a bacteria, fungi, and a virus is just kind of giving an example to show which way your brain should be going when you start looking at the plant. So diagnosing the plant is the hardest part, but it's probably the most important part to take you in the right direction so that you can figure out what's going on. So a couple of tips that the presenter gave us for diagnosing the plant pathology is trying to discover the cause of the disease. And this is, again, is it a fungi? Is it a bacteria? Is it a virus? Is it a nematode? Is it an abiotic cause, right? Is it sunburn or frost or hail damage or something like that? So trying to discover the cause of the disease, and then understanding what a normal, healthy plant looks like. That was one thing that I wish I had done, and my classmate wish she had done. She brought in a sample of her camellia, and we thought that it would be so much easier if we had looked at the damaged leaves and compared that to a good looking leaf, and being able to notice the difference and really see, like how yellow was the damaged leaf? How, what is this actually supposed to look like? Is it normal, if you have a plant that has leaf drop, is it normal? Is the plant deciduous, right? There are actually plants, we have trees here in California, I think they're called buckeyes, that are actually summer deciduous. They lose all their leaves in the summer. So if you didn't know that, and then all of a sudden you have a tree in your backyard that loses all its leaves in the summer, and you think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with my tree, but it's a California buckeye and it's supposed to lose its leaves in the summer, you kind of need to know what normal looks like and what you're dealing with. Then you need to have a concept of the plant's history. Was there a hailstorm? Did we have a really wet spring like we, or I should say wet late winter, wet spring? Has there been a drought? Were some other plants in the garden infected with some other disease or something like that? Were you using your tools in your friend's garden that has a disease, and then you brought your tools back home, and then that might have spread the disease from your friend's garden to your garden? You kind of need to know the history of what you're dealing with and really look back months ago, just to kind of think of, okay, what has this plant been through that maybe I'm seeing the symptoms now, but maybe something else happened months ago, which would explain these symptoms. And then finally, of course, look for the signs and symptoms. Look and see if you can see what the plant's trying to tell you, and then look even closer and see if you can see any signs. Again, if it's a fungi, you're going to see something dry with defined borders. If it's a bacteria, you're going to see something oozy and wet. Those are obviously generalizations, but it should help you be able to point you in the right direction. Even if you have to go to your local plant center and you have to ask one of them, being able to say, oh, there's a spot on there that's really oozy and wet is going to be able to help them identify the problem a lot better if you just say, oh, the leaves are yellow and wilting, right? So just being able to really see the signs and symptoms. In class, they actually had those little tiny loops, magnifying loops. I forget what they're called. I'm going to actually purchase one of those for myself because it was really amazing to see these diseases really close up, magnified. Because it was like, oh, that's what a fungus looks like. That's pretty easy to identify. Or, oh, that's what a bacterial infection looks like. That's pretty easy to identify. So taking a closer look at actually what's going on with your plant is going to make it a lot easier for you all to be able to identify what is actually going on and then be able to take some action to treat it. All right, so I hope this was helpful for you all. It was definitely helpful for me. I think it's going to be more helpful once I get out into my garden this spring and summer and really start looking at the issues that I have going on with my plants. Again, early identification is key when you're dealing with a plant pathology. So if you see something going on, kind of think about it. Take another look at it, see if you can see anything a little bit deeper, and then just start thinking about it. And experience is key with these type of things, right? Once you've seen rust, you know what rust looks like. I actually hadn't seen rust until last summer when I saw rust on my hollyhocks. And I know hollyhocks get rust. And so then I went, oh, that's what rust looks like, right? But my neighbor that was sitting next to me in class, she has tons of rust in her garden. So she knew exactly what rust looks like. So experience is key with a lot of these things, and familiarizing yourself what type of pathologies are plants in your region go through is really important. But knowing, kind of a behind the scenes, what's going on, virus, fungi, and bacteria, I think will help us all out as gardeners a lot as well. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.